Hi, friends. I have with me Quentin Navia. She resides in San Francisco, California. She's a great director and a music artist. What captured my attention when I first met her was that she's a US citizen who loves our culture, and I would say even more than a native Bolivian or native Peruvian. And I'm so proud to introduce to you Quentin Navia. Hi, Quentin. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. you know, it it made me think that the first time I ever heard a flute was when I came to San Francisco. I was a teenager still, and I was walking around San Francisco. It was in the middle of the summer of love here, and I heard the sound of a flute. And I thought, that is so beautiful. And I kept walking up and down Grant Avenue. and I saw a man and a woman, two hippies walking down the street playing harmony and melody. Oh, if only I had learned to play music when I was young. I said, but I'm probably too old now. That was my thought then. And several years later, I had the fortune of being an art director in upstate New York for a few months, and I went to a festival to hear some music, and all of a sudden I looked to my right and there was this little string instrument I had never seen before with an armadillo shell. And the group got up to play, and they had pan flutes and notched flutes and wooden flutes, and I just fell in love with the music. And I thought I had never heard anything more beautiful in my life, and there were no seats in the front. And I remember going and kind of squatting down in front of the front row with my long black hair. And I remember the four men who had come down from Montreal were all winking at me and waving at me, and I thought, that's not professional. But anyway, after they played, they surrounded me thinking I was from Peru or Bolivia. They were speaking Spanish and Quechua and French. And I didn't understand a word they said, but I said, are you hungry? And they said, yes. I said, well, bring your flutes. And I called the girlfriend to make some dinner, and they piled them in this little car and took them home and made some dinner. But all the while they were showing me these flutes. And when they left me a Kenna flute. I forgot to ask him exactly how to blow it, but they went back to Montreal. But I'll never forget tooting and trying to figure out what end to blow. And I kept hearing sounds like this. And it was the next door neighbor banging on the wall because I was driving him crazy with my toot, 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 toot. But I finally got one sound. It took me almost 3 weeks. And then I had this impulse to get some bamboo and try to make a flute. Just like that. I had no idea. I only had a Swiss knife. But I began to try to break through the knot of the bamboo and try to etch a hole out. And pretty soon I was up visiting the group in Montreal for a week, and then 2 weeks, and then 3 months. And then pretty soon I was up in Montreal making these Kenna flutes and traveling with this group because I became their English spokesperson. But as I was making the flutes, I was learning to play the Kenna. And I had a little card saying, flutes des hommes Quentin, Quentin. But after a year of traveling, the group disbanded. And with one of the members, we started to perform. But by then I had learned the Kenna and the Antara, the Samponia, a little charango, a few Quechua songs. And we started to perform, and that was in the beginning of 1975. But people kept coming over to me and saying, I've seen you play, and your English is getting much better. And I thought, they think I only speak Spanish. And so I bought a Spanish dictionary, and I convinced my friend, this great musician, that we needed to go down to the Andes and sell everything we had, really. Put all the money in a money belt and the passport and the Spanish dictionary and get on a bus. And it took us through 15 months of traveling by land from Montreal down to Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama. And we took a little Braniff plane to Quito. And then we went up to the north of Ecuador to Ibarra and Saca City, and down all the way to the south of Bolivia, to Tarija. But spending time trying to see as many indigenous festivals as we could. But we had actually began Sukay and performed for about 3/4 of a year before we left on this tour. And so
It's just amazing how, even though we, because of the epidemic of the virus, we're not together performing this interview, but just by looking at your expressions, the sound of your voice, Quentin, you just made me travel. I felt like I was following you. I was seeing all these things you were experiencing. It's just amazing how, even though we're not together next to each other, I could sense that passion that you express when you're telling me your story. So what I recover a little bit of the reading I had and the book that you wrote at the beginning of Sukay. So I think we're coming to that point, and if you can tell us exactly what happened at this moment, how you came out with this name and how you began this wonderful project that it's called Sukay.
what you said about the corona, I have to confess that this time that we've been spending inside is just, for me, invaluable. I can't tell you how thankful I've been for this time. And because we get so much, and so caught up in the activity of life. And I remember in those early days of Sukay, when we were traveling from Montreal down on that 15-month travel, there was so much travel from Montreal down on that 15-month travel. There was so much time. You're out in the countryside. You're able to just breathe the fresh air and the mountains. And we went to indigenous festivals. And at first, everything was so strange. I wondered why people were playing those melodies over and over and over again. And yeah, they were playing the same melodies for 3 or 4 days. And frequently at the end of those 3 or 4 days, the melodies were a little discordant because people were drinking so much. But I began to see this amazing thing that people were playing these melodies because it was affecting them in a very organic way, that people, instead of here where people were becoming virtuosos and famous, and people were playing music down there to lose their identity, lose their thoughts, lose their personal self, and become part of this huge community oneness, playing a melody frequently in tones like F sharp that were in tune with the earth and the agricultural seasons. And there were so many amazing mysteries like this that the travels were, I didn't know if I was going to come back. I could have stayed in the mountains in the Andes, really. And it's funny, when I got to Bolivia, when I got to Sucre, which is the capital of Bolivia, I saw a poster for Xavi and Dina, who were our heroes, really. We had the albums of Navia Arias and the first Xavi and Dina. We'd heard it. We went to see them, and it was a real honor to have seen Xavi and Dina back in 1976 with Julio Cesar Perez, Oscar Alcides Mejia, Cato, and Eddie. And I said hi to everyone except Eddie. And I didn't say hi to him because when I turned to go over there, he had all the girls around him. I think Miss Bolivia was standing next to him. And I thought, okay, I think I'll not say hi to that guy. He must be so conceited. And I left, of course, after that we got down to Tarija. So many amazing experiences. It would take me months to account for. But anyway, we got back to Montreal after that 15 months bringing instruments, and we began to perform in duo as Sukay. And we performed in some of the big festivals in Canada. We were touring all the way to Gaspésie and down to New York, and we played Lincoln Center, Avery Fisher Hall, as part of just as two, part with another group, the Andean group. And we toured a lot, and then we began to bring other musicians into the group. We had heard Gonzalo Vargas, we brought him up from Bolivia, and we came together. There was a Bolivian called Javier Canelas, whose brother actually played with Carcass, Nani Canelas. And so we brought them into our group in '78, and I moved everyone down from Montreal to San Francisco in '78, and back then we had 4 booking agents. So we toured all the way up to Santa Claus's house in the North Pole, and we had a Canadian booking agent who booked us through the Yukon and Smithers, Terrence, and Indian reservations and Revelstoke, all the way to Montreal and Gaspésie. We had another one on the East Coast, and we do the Nashville and Appalachian down to Mexicali, and we went to China, and so we toured a lot. We actually did Carnegie Hall and the Smithsonian Institution and big theaters, but we also did, what kept us in balance was the night after we did Carnegie Hall, we flew back to play in the Sacramento Cultural Center, where the broken down sound system and sleeping on someone's floor kept you in perspective of the life of a musician. You know, you never have real pretenses. But I think for me, it was always the joy of being able to communicate the music that I had fallen in love with. And each time I was on stage, I felt I'm an introvert and I'm a shy person. And if you had told me in my youth that I was going to be on stage, I would have said no. But something happened when I was on stage to perform Music of the Andes. It was the love that I felt for the people in the audience, and that I could communicate the love I felt for this music into that. And the wonderful condition of that time was that there was no YouTube. You know, now I can see Luzmila Carpio when I want, or I can go to Norte Potosí and see a tinku being danced and fought just by opening the computer. But back in the 70s and 80s, there was none of that. So there were no way for the North American audience to see the variety of the Andean musics, to hear the stories of the regions. So Sukay became known for playing music with all the different instruments. We do an estampa with moseñas and parques and hula hulas, and then we do a rondador, and then we do a toyos, and trying to show all of singing Quechua, and just giving a piece of the soul of all the music that we had taken in. And I think one of the lucky things, and I don't think any musician would agree with me that this is lucky, but back in '77, when we returned to Montreal as a duo, we went into a studio and recorded live the very first album called Music of the Andes. There was only 2 of us who recorded that album. And we kind of did it live on a farm in a recording studio. But after that, Polydor and Polygram had heard the music we did and wanted to sign us to their label. And we were brought in. The other person didn't want to go because they didn't speak English very well. So I volunteered. I went to meet the big A&R person from New York, from Polygram. And they wanted to sign Sukay. And as they brought me into this meeting, they said, this is probably the biggest day of your life. But in the meeting, the man said, we're going to add synthesizers to your music. And we're going to choose the music you play. And we're going to choose who you play with. Pretty much choose everything. And I said no. And they couldn't believe that I was saying no to this big money fame, and practically took me by my collar out of this meeting, shaking their head, thinking, how did you give up that? But there was never a regret on my part, because an artist needs freedom. And when you go with a major label, you do not have freedom of your own recordings. And it happened again when Eddie joined Sukay, and we began the Sukay record label. We went to the big NARM conference, and Atlantic Records approached us. They had heard the Cumbre CD we had recorded, and they sent the A&R person to talk to us. But we were beginning a record label. And we had to choose, do you want to be a famous artist who sells their soul to the music industry, or do you want to create music honestly, independently, and somewhat anonymously? And we decided for the later that we were going to create our record label, which we did, and not go with the major labels. I mean, you do sell your soul in a way.
That's true. That the way you say, yeah, it's like you said before. I'm still like all over, with the experiences that you just share with us. You made me picture every space, and mainly that experience, right? And I do agree with you when it comes to the business part. So we gotta have a balance. You're the artist, so do you compose? Do you wanna do your painting, or do you just wanna go for the money and have somebody else do it for you? It's amazing to me how I strongly believe that you made the right choice, because you have the heart, the spirit of a true artist. And to me, that's music, that's art. And I wanna thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that's why you still perform. You still, every time people see you, and when I see you play, you still transmit that energy to me. Being said that, compared to an artist that goes for that, I want to go to a label, I want to have somebody else do it for me. To me, it's just kind of just giving your soul away, and it doesn't count as music anymore. You recorded about how many years you're together with Eddie?
Well, we've been married for 30 years. So for 31 years, we began recording. Of course, Alcides had left Saviandina earlier and moved to Miami. And we had the great privilege of having him tour with us on some of Sukay's tours. And, some wonderful artists, Enrique Coria from, Cuatro de Cordova, and Yuri Ortuño toured with us when he was just a kid, just a skinny 20-year-old. He toured with us in the mid-'80s.
Now, Quentin, roughly, so you're almost like maybe 20 years before Eddie, and another 30 years with Eddie.
No, I think it was 15 years we toured. 15 years we toured. And then when Eddie and I met and married, we toured another 10 years.
Roughly, do you remember about how many albums you have produced?
I kind of only counted the albums. We did 24 albums.
Wow.
May have been some that I took off the market that were earlier Sukay albums. I know it.
Yeah.
So when you get in the studio, it's kind of like the dentist's office. When you get in there and you look in that light, you feel that you've been there forever.
Yep.
It's like when you're recording in the studio and mixing and tweaking and working on it, especially in the mixing. You feel like you've been there forever. You spend nights and nights. And it's amazing. We see our music on Spotify, and we're never really receive remuneration for it. It's kind of exciting. We were dabbling in Zoom because a friend was having a party and asked us to perform in their party, and that was our first experience with Zoom. So now we think we're going to find a way to do more with Zoom.
I know we're running a little bit out of time, but before we go, I would like to ask you a few personal questions. Trust me, they're not too personal, just what people want to know. If you could tell us, what's your favorite color?
My favorite colors, I think, are red and black.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Favorite flavor in ice cream?
Chocolate.
First date location?
My first date? Wow. It had to be in New York.
Favorite singer, either English or Spanish?
It's Montecapia.
Favorite city?
I love Sukay. I love Copacabana. I love so many places. Potosi, all of Tarija.
Quentin, thank you so much for joining us with Conversando con Wecha. Would you please say goodbye to all our viewers that follow us in different platforms?
Thank you so much, and it's been a true honor to spend a lifetime playing this amazing music at the Andes. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and please tune in again for the future episodes of Conversando con Wecha.
Volverte a ver aquella noche de mi partida, lloro de amor. Aquella noche para mi vida no amaneció. Aquella noche entristecida murió una